I'd like to basically just touch on some of the metrics and then move beyond that because, in a sense, retail is less quantifiers and more in terms of macro and trends and the change in dynamics. One thing I think it's fair to say is that we have, as an industry in general, we've gone from an industry of movement and growth and dynamic to probably more in terms, I won't say static, but in terms of just natural, ordinary evolution. So for retail, we have to adapt to our changing age and demographics and also in terms of the economy. So actually, this is if you kind of look at what Paul just distributed, this is that for the retail market, which is about 22 million square feet as it's been defined. Mid-year occupancy is at 9.3%, which is down about 60 basis points since end of first quarter. So you see a little bit, but some of that really just is a seasonal adjustment because is that you always see a cycle of some retailers who basically is move out of the market after the holidays, and then other folks trying to open up for basically is the next fall. And then the absorption was 140,000 square feet. That's versus about 180,000 square feet a year ago, which really is a story of a slow recovery. But in the world of numbers, is 140 or 180 is minute in 22 million square feet. It's the law of small numbers. I'm not sure what's very meaningful other than it seems to be a little kind of constant. Then we kind of basically digress, which is there really ends up being two stories. For lease renewals, the renewals have not been basically moving upward. Is if the ownership wishes to retain the existing tenancy, it's been relatively soft given the fact that there are not a lot of inherent costs involved with a renewal. And frankly, this is that more often than not, the landlord wishes to continue his stabilized income stream rather than start over by taking a vacancy. So you see rates basically in the 16 to 24 range. I'm sure there's some anomalies and exceptions. And really it's about basically what are your choices and options. And when you're doing a renewal, you don't have better choices or options. For new construction, obviously, it is by omission. If you can't pay it, no one can construct it. And to basically get a return on cost that makes sense, those numbers are at $28 to $34 a square foot. I mean, if you can't pay it, who can construct it? Now let's talk about the second part is really what's influencing our retail market. And I'm really going to focus on in terms of our economy as compared to what's happening in retail. We all know how the internet has changed all of us, and frankly, this is that I assure you that Playboy magazine understands what the internet did to it, and so does the U.S. Postal Service, and so retail's been very affected by that. But the influences here in Tucson is new home construction, which is nominal. It's not non-existent, but it's nominal. As a result of that, the converse is that our private sector is a little bit more relevant, I won't say dynamic than before, and its growth is flat. Oh, I'm out of time. No, I'm not. May unemployment as a reference point, and this is, I think, the interesting story for Pima County was 6.3%, which is down point from 7.1. And it's also an interesting relevance to 7.8 and 7.6 statewide. And that is interesting because I increasingly, particularly in the restaurant component, they're paying attention to Tucson because they see the fact is our employment will affect some of their sales projections, and that helps some folks who want to add a store or two. Employment growth in the private sector is really in the service sector. It's about all it is. And we all know the story of what's happening as the growth is part-time, which means it's not bringing people or jobs into the market as much as it's re-employing some people or keeping some people employed that otherwise wouldn't be. As you well know, is that the economics are not very good. It's that $9 to $12 an hour range and without benefits. Our middle class, and this is the other thing, is this is really the story of yesterday, and I mean yesterday meaning Wednesday. Macy's, which is best in class of the major big retailers, who has, for the financial markets, has been the best performer for the last 12 to 16 quarters, reported, I'm out of time, but I'm not done, so. But I'm a man of many words. Anyway, is that the middle class consumer's activity is really focused on some catch-up issues, and that is fixing up your home, replacing the couch that you didn't, getting that TV that basically is that big box you don't want on the table anymore. You want the flat screen, and we're not spending on apparel. And Macy's really showed that. And so that's the number right now, which is people are not indulging themselves with their wardrobe. They're focusing on kind of catch-up. That's an important word going forward. It's catch-up. Catch-up on what we haven't done for the last 7 years. Tucson foreclosures are down, but we still have the reality, and this is the reality of a financial crisis and a recovery from a financial crisis. Many owners still have little, none, or negative equity, and that affects their psychology and their view of the future. You know, when you got basically $1 million stashed away and a quarter of it is in your home, you feel like you kind of took care of your future. And when you zero that out, you're a little bit less optimistic. And a consumer-driven society basically is really interested in that consumer psychology. Now we're coming back to is the bad part of our crisis, the Great Recession, was that for the first time ever we saw the public sector revenues sink, and we got impacted in ways that this market has never been impacted, particularly in contrast to Phoenix. And now we're seeing basically is that the public sector is now bigger in this market than ever before as a percentage pie, and the community economy, the consumer economy is now more stable. Ties back to that 6.3% rate, but it also means that public sector revenues are starting to come back. We are in the world of slow growth. We're probably not the kind of dynamic community that we all got programmed to think about. And here's the last trends. I know you're very really. I know space is that great, we got I know you want me to stop. Is we've got hot. You know what? You can pull this. Okay.
I'll give you a few more seconds.
Thank you. At the hubs and the regional hubs, there's a lot of demand, and therefore landlords have choices. In the residential and the mature markets, it's flat, and landlords have few options. That kind of reflects some of those rates. Restaurant traffic and sales are flat. The hubs are very strong. They're stable, and therefore, as landlords are experiencing some interesting stories, and the same story as regarding residential mature. And I don't have to tell you who you see basically is active in the market users. That's where the construction is. And the final is after a 7-year hiatus, we are basically in a catch-up mode. Retailers are now trying to resize, right-size, downsize, reposition, and retreat. So there's some activity that's been deferred, but it's not the dynamic of growth. Thanks.